周一長談同大家深入時事話題。加拿大新嘅國籍法已經最近正式生效啦。呢個法律咧係1年前嘅時候就問世同大家介紹嘅時候就已經引起好多嘅爭執。政府咧就話呢個係一個增加我哋加拿大公民價值同埋佢嘅尊嚴嘅一個好重要嘅法案，但係咧反對嘅律師團體、移民團體甚至人權團體咧就認為呢一個法案根本就係犯法、違憲同埋違反人權嘅。對於呢一個咁有爭執性嘅話題咧，我哋今日再一次請到我哋主管移民同埋公民嘅國務秘書Mr. Costas Menegakis 嚟同我哋再一次講清楚、説明白。Welcome again, Mr. Menegakis.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here again this year with you. We were together last year at this time.
Yes, last year, exactly a year ago, you were here to explain to us and introduce to us this new law. But since then, this whole year, it seems that this new law, this reformed version, has been associated with the word controversial. Can you tell us what are the focus of all these controversies and what have the government done to clarify it?
Well, we're speaking about Bill C-24, the Strengthening Canadian Citizenship Act. I'm happy to say that all of the components of Bill C-24 are now in force, and very pleased to say that we are seeing some major benefits already. For example, one of the key elements of C-24 was to take the citizenship process from a 3-step process to a 1-step process, which means that someone who had completed all of the requirements of permanent residency and so forth, once they applied for Canadian citizenship, they were waiting for sometimes up to 3 years to get their citizenship. Well, now, I'm happy to say, we're within a 12-month period. In 2014 alone, a record number of 262,000 new Canadians for Canada. It's a wonderful thing. Now, with respect to the controversy, unfortunately, this is an election year, and we have opponents in government, opposition parties, that unfortunately are spreading misinformation about the legislation on a number of aspects, some of which I would like to get into with you today, so that we can clarify them for Canadians that are being so generous by watching us at this time.
And I know that you have been traveling across the countries, not campaigning, but basically is to try your best to clarify.
Sure.
And I hope that today is also a chance for our citizens to understand that. Last year, we have the same issues, and it seems that those issues has not been solved or not even been softened by the oppositions. And the first one is the revocation of citizenship.
Yes.
And it is, when I read the fine lines that comes later on, is that the citizen and the Immigration Canada minister can revoke our citizenship if it is a routine case. That is the fine line. And then, but the federal court, which you introduced to us last time, the federal court makes decision only on complex cases. So can you help us to understand what are the routine cases and what are the complex cases?
Absolutely. Well, revocation is a key component of the legislation. It calls for the revocation of citizenship from a dual citizen if they have obtained it fraudulently. I haven't met one Canadian in the country. We haven't heard from one person that said that someone should keep their citizenship if they were not truthful in the information they provided when they obtained it in the first place. It also calls for the revocation of citizenship in cases where an individual has perpetrated one of the crimes of treason, high treason, espionage, or terror against Canada, the Canadian people, or our Canadian troops. In those instances, that would be considered what you would consider a more complex case. It's a case where a federal court has found an individual guilty of one of those crimes. They've been found guilty in a federal court. They do have the right to appeal right up to the Supreme Court if they like. But ultimately, if they've been found guilty of those crimes, of treason, high treason, espionage, or terror, then they will be stripped of their citizenship. They are, of course, going to be in prison, because it doesn't mean that you don't do prison time. You'll be in prison, you'll be in jail because you'll be a criminal, a terrorist, but you will lose your Canadian citizenship while you're in prison. Now, a routine case would be a case of a fraudulent situation. Somebody gave us wrong information, a wrong name. They didn't disclose information about their past or their record. We found that they lied about the time that they were genuinely supposed to be in the country and they were not in the country, that kind of stuff. Those are routine cases where we find that someone was not truthful in their application.
You did mention that the one who is accused or found guilty, they have to go to jail. They have to complete their sentence, and then after that, they will be deported. Is that the case?
They will not be Canadian citizens.
They will not be Canadian citizens.
But I think it's important to point out that this does not affect 99.99999% of the very dynamic, very vibrant, multicultural, ethnic communities in our country, law-abiding Canadian citizens that contribute to their families, to their communities, to the Canadian economy. No one can arbitrarily lose their citizenship. It does not affect them. What we are talking about, and I think it's important for citizens to understand this, we are talking about perhaps 24 cases, maybe 20, 30 people at most, over a 20-year period, that have been found guilty of these very heinous crimes against the country. It's misinformation and fear-mongering for responsible, positioned individuals to go out into the communities and to fear-monger by by stating that someone, or a minister or anybody, can arbitrarily take away their citizenship. You cannot lose your citizenship in Canada, period, if you obtained it legally and if you did not commit one of those crimes. I sit here today when a lot of members of my own family are dual citizens. None of us are concerned. None of us in the Greek community are concerned. At leadership for sure, and certainly in the citizens in the communities that I speak to. People get concerned when they hear a politician from another party say to them, the minister can now take away your citizenship. That is not true. It is a falsehood. It is fear-mongering. It is preying on innocent people that do not know the actual meaning of the legislation.
One lawyer has they raised this question and actually I've also heard from the community, it's about the same crime should have been the same sentence if you're Canadian citizens, whether you are you have a dual citizen or not. The sentence should be the same. But for those who have dual citizenship, you have an extra penalty that is to be stripped of your Canadian citizenship. So what I've heard is that it created a sense of second-grade citizen amongst the citizens who have dual citizenship other than Canadian. How do you respond to that?
Well, let me explain it. First of all, in terms of the crimes themselves, certainly the sentences are equal. You get the equal prison time. You're treated by the judicial system the very same. All Canadians, irrespective of whether they only have one citizenship or dual citizenship, are treated equally under the laws of Canada. Canada is signatory to an international convention, 1961. This was signed, that states that we cannot render somebody stateless if they only have one citizenship. We cannot take away that citizenship because that would render them stateless. I think it's also very important to note that when someone has a dual citizenship, they also have dual benefits. And that dual citizen, by the way, when they became Canadian citizens, put their hands on their document of worship or pledged it outright. They pledged to abide by the laws of Canada. So we would argue, Canadians would argue, of whether they're dual citizens or not, that when you pledge that you're going to abide by the laws of Canada, and based on that oath of citizenship, that solemn pledge that you make, you're granted citizenship into the country, and then you go out, perpetrate terror on Canadian people, espionage against Canada, against troops, brave men and women fighting for our country. You clearly, you're on by yourself, violating that pledge of citizenship that you made. You yourself are revoking your citizenship, because if you had said the day that you're getting your citizenship that this is what you intend to do, you would not be granted your citizenship, surely. So I realize that some people out there, we know that people out there are saying, well, how come a Canadian can't lose their citizenship that was born here, but I got mine after and I can lose mine? You have an option. If that's that big of a concern to you, first of all, don't commit any of those crimes. You never have to worry ever in the rest of your life. Neither do your children, neither do your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, or anybody that comes after you. If you don't commit these crimes, that's not an issue for you. And to sit and to argue about those 20 to 30 people that are going to perpetrate these terror acts on Canadians and try to defend their case of whether they should keep their citizenship or not, most Canadians don't want to make that argument. Most Canadians would say, no, I'm sorry. You should spend your rest of your life in jail, never mind. But if you happen to get out, you're not welcomed here, since you already have benefits from another country as well. And if we could do something to further penalize people or prevent and denounce people from perpetrating these acts of terror on Canadian people, we think, as a government, it's important that we do it.
So according to your explanation, I can see that whether you are dual citizenship or you have only a Canadian citizenship, the punishment is the same, the sentencing is the same. But when you take away the dual citizenships, the holders' Canadian citizenship, it's really in react to their breach of the oath and the contract that was set when they have sworn in to become a Canadian citizenship.
In addition to that, both those individuals, say two of them commit an act of terror together. Say they're friends, just for all intents and purposes. One is a dual citizen, one is not. They get found guilty in a court of law, they're both in prison. At the end of the day, they both have a citizenship. One of them will have Canadian, the other will have the other citizenship. But they're both citizens of a country.
I don't know if that's convinced the people who host these thoughts, but you have clarified certain fine points of this new law. Let's take a break and we'll come back to more controversies.
Sure.
Thank you.